My name is Sandra Silvestri. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Ipsen. I'm actually an endocrinologist by training. I've been now in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 20 years. And before that, I was in the academic world in the hospital. As you can easily hear from my accent, I'm Italian. Actually, in Ipsen, I'm the Chief Medical Officer. Ipsen, I guess, as you know, is a global multinational company with, I would say, a unique journey. We have our roots grounded in science and in more than 100 years of experience. We work mainly in three therapy areas: in oncology, in neuroscience, and in rare disease. And in the field of rare disease, we are really building a strong franchise, both on, I would say, two therapy area. One is bone and one is rare cholestatic disorder. As a company, I would say we are guided by science, by deep medical understanding, by a passion for making a difference for the patient that we have and that we serve every day. Because in the end, we measure success based on the impact that we are able to have on people's life. PBC is a rare autoimmune chronic cholestatic liver disease, which is growing in terms of prevalence, both in the US and in Europe and across, I would say, worldwide. It causes cholestasis in the liver, and this cholestasis leads to chronic inflammation of the intrahepatic bile duct. This is an irreversible process, so it brings to scarring of the liver, leading then to chronic consequences, like, for example, cirrhosis, and in 40% of the patients, a need for a transplant in around 10 years. It's a lifelong condition that it worsens over time. In terms of clinical manifestation, it affects mainly women. So 9 out of 10 are women. And the women are usually around the menopausal age, so between 40 and 60, with some symptoms that are very aspecific. And that's the reason why having a diagnosis is not something that is easy. Sometimes it takes long. But the symptoms really have a deep impact on the quality of life of those women and on those patients. So 80-90% of the patients refer fatigue. That is not just being tired, it's a profound debilitating fatigue. And in around 40% of the patients, they also refer severe itching. The disease usually, if it's not well managed, can lead to progressive liver damage. And then, as I said before, the need for liver transplant. So in terms of management, the first objective for the clinician is to slow down the progression of the disease. And the second objective, of course, is also control the symptoms, both fatigue, that is very debilitating, and pruritus. And I have to say that with Iqirvo and the data that we have just presented at EASL, we have clearly shown that we can have an effect on both. I would say, first of all, is the suspect, because in many cases, those patients go to the GPs, and it's the GPs that have to think to potentially refer the patient to a specialist. The patient, as I said, refer very specific symptoms like fatigue, but those are usually around the perimenopausal women, refer pruritus, and then, of course, there is a series of lab tests that shows abnormalities. So then the patients get referred to the specialist, and the specialist make all the assessment and start a proper treatment. So usually the patient starts the first line treatment that is done with the UDCA. And I have to say that 60% of the patients have a good control with that. But we still have 40% of the treatment, 40% of the patients that doesn't show to be fully controlled in terms of biochemical markers and in terms of symptoms with the first line. And then there is a need of having a proper and effective second line treatment. So actually, it was just a few weeks ago, and I'm really excited to share the the data that we have published, because it's really showing our commitment to transforming care for patients with rare liver disease. Actually, as a company, we have a full rare liver disease pipeline. As I said, we have a global footprint and year of experience in developing and commercializing rare disease medicine. So as far as Iqirvo, so Elafibranor data is concerned, Elafibranor is a PPAR alpha delta, so is a dual agonist, is the only dual agonist PPAR. And it offers meaningful improvement in slowing down the sign of disease progression in PBC. And this has been widely demonstrated with the registration studies and with the approval, both in the US and in Europe. What we have been able to show is that it also has a significant impact on fatigue, that, as I said before, is one of the most relevant clinical symptoms that really have a negative impact on the quality of life. The positive effect on fatigue occurs in an independent manner versus the effect on pruritus. We thought in the past that the two were linked. We thought that you have pruritus, so you don't sleep well at night, and not sleeping well, it results in fatigue. What we have been able to show and to publish is that the two are completely independent. There are patients that have pruritus and doesn't have fatigue, even if I would say the vast majority of patients, 80% of patients, have fatigue, and they might or might not have pruritus. And the effect on Iqirvo, on fatigue, and on pruritus are completely independent. We have also made a significant analysis on the proteomics, so how the proteins react both during the disease, so during PBC, and what's the impact of Elafibranor on those proteins. And we have seen that is due to the mechanism of action, is due to the dual PPAR alpha and delta. Thanks to the mechanism of action, Elafibranor can really activate both inflammation and fibrosis pathway, as well as a specific pathway linked to fibrosis. This is more on PBC. We have then also published, I have to say, we had the late-breaking data presented of Elafibranor in PSC. PSC is a completely different disease, and we have just published the data of the phase 2. So the phase 2 is a safety study in which we have investigated Elafibranor as a potential treatment for this disease, primary sclerosing cholangitis. So the data that we have published have shown not only that Elafibranor has a favorable safety profile, but also a dose-dependent efficacy over the 12 weeks of treatment for people living with PSC. PSC is another rare liver disease with a different disease, but there are today no approved treatment. So this is for us a very positive data that gives hope to us and to the patients community that we might potentially have in the future a drug that is effective not only on PBC, but also on PSC. I would say, first of all, there is a huge unmet need in rare liver disease. So for the general practitioner, I would say recognize the symptoms and do not underestimate if the lab tests are not in the normal range. So the request is just refer the patient to the specialist, to the hepatologist. Then the hepatologists, they know very well how to treat the patients. They start with the first line. They wait usually 6 months to see if the patient is responder or does not respond. And then if there is the need, they start a second line. I have to say that both conditions, PBC and now even PSC, can be treated. And the objective for the treatment is really reduce the disease progression. That is the first thing. So ensure that there is a biochemical control and that the patients are treated to target. And then the second objective of the treatment is control of the symptoms. 90% of the patients have fatigue. And was fun even during the Congress when we presented the data, because many physicians told us that they try to avoid that question during the visit with the patients. Because while for pruritus, there are some non-approved drugs that they use in the clinical practice, for fatigue, there is nothing available. So they were really avoiding to trigger that discussion because they didn't have a solution for the patient that was complaining about fatigue. Now with Elafibranor, we have. I would say the topic that I would like to cover is more related as we as a company and how much we are really committed to make a difference and to improve the life for people suffering with those rare cholestatic liver disease. So we have today 2 approved medicine with 5 indications, 3 approved indications and 2 indications under development. So we are really committed to this field and we feel that we can really make a difference for the patients suffering with this disease.